Once upon a time, a brave man named Joshua led his people to a new land. This tale begins with Joshua, a man of courage and unwavering faith who was chosen to guide his people, the Israelites, to a land promised to them by God, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of abundance and prosperity. Joshua, a humble servant, accepted this monumental task with grace and determination. He understood the weight of his responsibilities, and he knew that his people were relying on him. But Joshua was not alone. He had the power of faith and the strength of his people behind him. As the Israelites journeyed towards their destiny, they encountered a significant obstacle: the mighty Jordan River. It was flood season, and the river was wild and untamed. But Joshua, with his steadfast faith, didn't falter. He told his people, "Do not be afraid. Have faith, for God will guide us." And indeed, something miraculous occurred. As the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant stepped into the river's edge, the waters parted, creating a dry path through the river. It was a sight to behold, a testament to their faith and the power of their God. The Israelites walked through the riverbed, their hearts filled with awe and gratitude. Emerging on the other side of the river, they found themselves on the cusp of the Promised Land. It was a moment of triumph, a moment of unity. They had faced the mighty Jordan and had emerged victorious. Their journey was a testament to their faith, their unity, and their unwavering belief in God's promise. The crossing of the Jordan was a significant milestone in their journey. It was a symbol of their transition from a life of hardship to a life of abundance, from a life of uncertainty to a life of promise. It was a symbol of their faith and their trust in God's promise. As they entered the Promised Land, they knew that their journey was far from over. They knew that there would be challenges ahead, battles to be fought, and victories to be won. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had their faith. Entering the Promised Land was not just about reaching a physical destination. It was about a journey of faith, a journey of unity, and a journey of transformation. It was about a people who, led by a brave man named Joshua, had the courage to dream of a better life, the faith to believe in God's promise, and the determination to make that dream a reality. And so, Joshua and his people entered the Promised Land, ready to start a new chapter in their lives. They had crossed the Jordan, they had walked through the riverbed, and now they were ready to claim the land that had been promised to them. It was a new beginning, a new chapter, a new story to be told. And it all began with a brave man named Joshua leading his people to a new land. In the new land, there was a big city called Jericho with tall walls around it. These walls were so high and so strong, they seemed utterly impenetrable. It was as if they were whispering a challenge to anyone who dared approach. "Try and conquer us if you dare." But the Israelites, led by Joshua, were not to be deterred. They had a mission, a divine mission, and they were ready to face the challenge head on. Now you might be thinking, how could they possibly bring down those massive walls? Well, here's where the story gets interesting. You see, they didn't use battering rams, catapults, or any other siege weapons you might be imagining. No, not at all. Their weapon of choice was their unwavering faith in God and obedience to His commands. One day, Joshua had a vision. In this vision, he was visited by a divine messenger who told him exactly what he needed to do. The instructions were clear and straightforward, but also quite unusual. For 6 days, Joshua and his army were to march around the city of Jericho once, with the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and 7 priests blowing trumpets made of ram's horns. They were to do this in silence, with only the sound of the trumpets filling the air. Then, on the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times. But this time, at the end of the 7th round, when the priests blew their trumpets, everyone was to shout as loud as they could. Yes, you heard that right. They were to shout. This was not a battle strategy anyone had ever heard of before. But Joshua, trusting in God's plan, followed the instructions to the letter. So, for 6 days, the Israelites marched around the city just as they were told. The inhabitants of Jericho watched from their high walls, puzzled by this strange spectacle. Then came the 7th day. The Israelites made their rounds, the priests blew their trumpets, and then, as instructed, everyone shouted. They shouted with all their might, their voices echoing across the landscape. And guess what happened next? The impossible, the unimaginable. The walls of Jericho, those towering, intimidating walls, they came tumbling down, just like that. The city was laid bare, open for the taking. The Israelites, with their faith rewarded, charged into the city, capturing it as was promised to them. It was an incredible victory, achieved not through brute force, but through obedience, belief, and the power of their collective voice. And so, dear listeners, the story of the fall of Jericho is one of faith and obedience, of the power of collective action and the belief in the divine. It teaches us that no obstacle is too great, no challenge too daunting when we have faith and act in unity. With a great noise and the power of belief, the walls of Jericho fell, and the city was theirs. Now, let me tell you about a wise woman named Deborah. In a time when Israel was under the rule of Jabin, the king of Canaan, there arose a woman of wisdom, courage, and leadership. This woman was Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth. She was not only a wife and mother, but also a judge of Israel. Deborah would sit under a palm tree, known as the Palm of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And there, the Israelites would come to her for judgment. Deborah, being a prophetess, had a special connection with God. She could hear his voice and understand his will. When the Israelites were oppressed by the Canaanites, it was Deborah who heard God's command for a man named Barak to lead an army against them. However, Barak was hesitant and insisted that Deborah accompany him to the battle. Deborah agreed, but she prophesied that the honor of victory would not go to Barak but to a woman. Deborah's wisdom shone through her leadership. She knew that the battle against the Canaanites was not merely a physical one, but a spiritual one as well. She rallied the Israelites, reminding them of their strength and their faith in God. Under Deborah's leadership, 10,000 soldiers followed Barak to Mount Tabor to face Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army. The battle was fierce and the odds were against them. But Deborah did not waver. She encouraged Barak and his men, telling them that this was the day God had given into their hands. And as Deborah had prophesied, God confused Sisera and his chariots and army with a sudden storm, and they were defeated by Barak's forces. In the end, it was not Barak who ended the life of Sisera. Instead, it was Jael, a woman who was not a warrior, but had the courage to defeat Sisera while he was hiding in her tent. Thus, the honor of victory went not to a man, but to a woman, just as Deborah had prophesied. The victory over the Canaanites led to peace in the land of Israel for 40 years, and it was all thanks to the wisdom and leadership of a woman. Deborah was not just a leader, but a beacon of hope, encouraging her people to have faith and courage in the face of adversity. This story of Deborah reminds us of the power of wisdom, courage, and leadership. It shows us that anyone, regardless of gender, can lead people to victory if they have faith in God and the wisdom to follow his guidance. With Deborah's guidance, the people found victory. Remember, wisdom can lead us to great things. Have you ever heard about a man named Gideon? He was a true hero. In a time of great fear and uncertainty, Gideon emerged as a beacon of hope for his people. The Israelites were being oppressed by the Midianites, a formidable foe with a vast army. But Gideon, a man of humble beginnings, was chosen by God to lead the Israelites to victory. Gideon was initially doubtful. After all, he was from the weakest clan in Manasseh, and he considered himself the least in his family. However, God saw something in Gideon that he didn't see in himself. God saw a leader, a warrior, and above all, a man of unwavering faith. God gave Gideon a task to free the Israelites from the Midianites. But there was a twist. God told Gideon that his army was too large. It might seem strange, right? Usually in battles, the more soldiers, the better. But God had a plan. He wanted to show that victory was not by human strength alone, but by his divine power. So, Gideon sent home all but 300 of his men. Just imagine that. Gideon with only 300 men was to face an army as numerous as locusts. It was a daunting task, but Gideon trusted in God and prepared for battle. The night before the battle, God gave Gideon a sign. He told Gideon to sneak into the enemy camp. There, Gideon overheard a soldier talking about a dream that predicted their defeat by Gideon's hand. This bolstered Gideon's courage, and he returned to his camp, ready to face the Midianites. The battle strategy was unique. Each of Gideon's men held a trumpet and a jar with a torch inside. At Gideon's signal, they blew their trumpets, broke the jars, and revealed the torches. This created an illusion of a massive army, causing panic among the Midianites. They turned on each other in confusion, and the Israelites won without even having to fight. Gideon's victory over the Midianites was nothing short of miraculous. It wasn't about the strength of his army or his strategic genius, but his faith in God. He trusted God's plan even when it seemed impossible, and his faith led to victory. After the battle, the Israelites wanted to make Gideon their king, but Gideon refused, reminding them that only God was their king. His victory brought peace to the land for 40 years. The story of Gideon teaches us many lessons. It shows us that courage isn't about having the biggest army or the most powerful weapons. It's about having faith, even when the odds are against you. It's about trusting in God's plan, even when it doesn't make sense. Even against all odds, Gideon and his small army won, showing us that with faith and courage, anything is possible. Our last story is about a man with great strength named Samson and a woman named Delilah. In the time of the ancient Israelites, there lived a man named Samson who was blessed with unimaginable strength. This strength, however, was not of his own making, but was a gift from God. But there was a catch. To maintain his strength, he had to follow certain rules, one of which was to never cut his hair. Now, Samson was not just a strong man, he was also a judge of Israel, and he used his strength to protect his people against their enemies, the Philistines. But even the strongest of men have their weaknesses, and for Samson, his weakness was his love for a Philistine woman named Delilah. Delilah was beautiful and captivating, and Samson was smitten. But Delilah had a secret. She was promised a great sum of money by the Philistine rulers if she could discover the source of Samson's strength and find a way to overpower him. Intrigued by the challenge, Delilah agreed. She tried time and time again to coax the secret from Samson, but he was careful not to reveal the true source of his strength. However, Delilah was persistent, and she used her charm to wear him down. Eventually, Samson gave in. He told Delilah that his strength lay in his uncut hair. With this information, Delilah waited until Samson was fast asleep. Then she called a man to cut off his hair. When she woke him up, his strength had vanished. He was captured by the Philistines, who gouged out his eyes and made him a slave. Yet Samson's story didn't end there. While in captivity, his hair began to grow back, and with it, his strength. In a final act of bravery, during a gathering of the Philistine rulers, Samson prayed to God for strength one last time. He pushed against the pillars of the temple where they were gathered, bringing it down upon them and himself. Samson's life was a tale of great power and great fall, a testament to the fact that even the mightiest can fall due to their weaknesses. But it was also a story of redemption and bravery, of how even in his last moments, Samson used his strength to protect his people. Samson's story teaches us that true strength comes from within, and we must be careful in whom we place our trust. All these stories have something special to tell us. Let's take a moment to reflect on the tales we've just journeyed through, each one of them a gem, imparting wisdom and life lessons. We started with the story of Joshua and the Israelites entering the Promised Land. It wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about faith, courage, and unity. Joshua led his people across the Jordan River not on a bridge or a boat, but on dry ground. It was a demonstration of the incredible things that can happen when we trust in something bigger than ourselves and move forward together. The fall of Jericho, our next story, was a testament to perseverance and the power of faith. The walls of Jericho were formidable, but they were no match for the Israelites' unwavering belief and determination. They marched around the city for 7 days, and on the 7th day, with a great shout and the sound of trumpets, the walls came tumbling down. It was a clear lesson that no obstacle is too big when we are steadfast and have faith in our abilities and divine assistance. Then we turned our attention to Deborah, a wise and courageous woman who led God's people. She was a beacon of strength and justice, stepping up to lead when no one else would. Her story taught us about the importance of courage, wisdom, and leadership. It showed us that anyone, regardless of gender, can rise to the occasion and guide others towards the right path. Our fourth story was about Gideon, a humble man who, with God's guidance, overcame his fears and doubts to defeat the Midianites. Gideon's story was a classic tale of triumph over adversity. It reminded us that we should not let our insecurities hold us back. With a bit of courage and some divine guidance, we can conquer our fears and achieve great things. Finally, we delved into the story of Samson and Delilah, a tale of strength and vulnerability. Samson was the strongest man alive, yet he was vulnerable because of his love for Delilah. His story taught us about the balance between power and humility, and the importance of wisdom in choosing who to trust. Each of these stories, in their own unique way, has painted a beautiful picture of life's complexities. They have shown us the importance of faith, courage, perseverance, leadership, humility, and wisdom. They have taught us that we can overcome any obstacle if we believe in ourselves and in divine guidance. Remember, each story teaches us a valuable lesson about life. Keep these stories in your heart and they will guide you on your own journey. Have you ever had a friend who stuck by your side no matter what? Today, we're going to tell you a story about such a friendship. In the time of the judges, there lived a woman named Naomi. She was married to a man named Elimelech, and they had 2 sons. They were a happy family living in Bethlehem, but then a severe famine hit the land, so they moved to the land of Moab, where they hoped life would be better. But life had other plans. Naomi's husband died, leaving her alone with her 2 sons, who later married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Tragically, Naomi's sons also passed away after 10 years, leaving the 3 women alone in a foreign land. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, as she heard that the Lord had blessed her homeland with food. She told her daughters-in-law to return to their mothers' homes, to find new husbands and start fresh lives. Orpah, though sad, agreed and kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung to Naomi. She declared, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth's words were a promise, a vow of loyalty and love. She chose Naomi over a potentially easier life. She chose loyalty over convenience. Back in Bethlehem, Ruth worked tirelessly in the fields, gleaning leftover grain to feed both herself and Naomi. Her hard work, determination, and kindness did not go unnoticed. Boaz, the owner of the field and a relative of Naomi's late husband, was moved by Ruth's devotion to her mother-in-law. He ensured Ruth was protected and had enough grain to gather. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi, her kindness and hard work, led her to a new life that she could never have imagined. Boaz, touched by her noble qualities, married Ruth. And Ruth, who was once a foreigner in the land, became the great-grandmother of none other than King David. This story of Ruth and Naomi is a testament to the power of friendship and loyalty. It shows us that true friends stick by each other no matter the circumstances. They support each other, care for each other, and like Ruth, they choose each other. This tale is not just about the loyalty of a friend, but also about kindness to others, hard work, and faith in God's plan. Ruth, a woman of noble character, teaches us that loyalty and kindness can lead to blessings beyond our imagination. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi shows us the power of true friendship. Remember, true friends stick together in good times and bad. Do you know what happens when people don't appreciate what they have? Let's find out. There was a time when the people of Israel had a unique arrangement. They didn't have a king like other nations. Instead, they had judges, leaders chosen by God Himself to guide them. The last of these judges was a wise and faithful man named Samuel. But as Samuel grew old, the people began to worry. They feared what might happen when Samuel was no longer there to lead them. So they came to Samuel with a request. "Give us a king to lead us," they said, "like all the other nations have." This request saddened Samuel. He knew that having a king was not what God wanted for his people. God had always been their king, guiding them and protecting them. But the people were insistent. They didn't want to be different from other nations. They wanted a human king, someone they could see and follow. Samuel tried to warn them. He told them how a king would take their sons and daughters, their fields and vineyards, and their best animals. He warned them that a king would make them his servants. But the people wouldn't listen. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." Samuel was heartbroken, but he took their request to God. And God, in his infinite wisdom, responded, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." God told Samuel to give the people what they wanted, but also to warn them of the consequences. And so Samuel did as God instructed. He told the Israelites they would have their king, but he also warned them one last time of the price they would pay. The people didn't heed his warning, and soon after, Saul was anointed as the first king of Israel. But as time passed, the Israelites saw the truth in Samuel's words. They saw how a human king could be flawed and make mistakes. They saw how a king could lead them astray. They learned the hard way that what they thought they wanted was not what was best for them. Sometimes, like the Israelites, we too don't appreciate what we have until it's gone. We may think we know what's best for us, but it's important to remember that our understanding is limited. It's always wise to trust in God, who sees the bigger picture and knows what's truly best for us. The Israelites learned the hard way that sometimes what we want isn't always what's best for us. Have you ever felt like the underdog? Like you're not as big or strong or popular as others? Well, this story is for you. Long, long ago, in the land of Israel, there was a man named Jesse. Jesse had 8 sons, each strong and capable in his own right. But today we're not talking about the oldest, the strongest, or the most popular. We're talking about the youngest, the smallest, the shepherd boy, David. When the time came for God to choose a new king for Israel, he didn't call upon the mighty warriors or the eloquent speakers. He called upon the prophet Samuel and told him to go to Jesse's house, for the future king was one of his sons. Samuel arrived at Jesse's home with a special task, but as he looked at the 7 eldest sons, each one bigger and seemingly more kingly than the last, he was left puzzled. God had not chosen any of them. Could there be a mistake? But God whispered to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." And so Samuel asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse replied, "There is still the youngest. He is tending the sheep." Samuel insisted on seeing him, and so David was called. David was not like his brothers. He was ruddy, with bright eyes and a gentle spirit. But when he stood before Samuel, God said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." And so Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in the presence of his brothers. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day onwards. Isn't it interesting how God chose David? He wasn't the biggest or the strongest, nor was he a great warrior like his brothers. But he had something far more important. He had a good heart, full of faith and love for God. David's story is a reminder that God doesn't look at the things people look at. People judge by outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. He sees our thoughts, our feelings, our intentions. He knows us better than we know ourselves. So, if you ever feel like you're not enough, remember David. Remember that you don't have to be the biggest or the strongest or the most popular. You just have to be you. God values the kindness in your heart, the courage in your spirit, and the love in your actions. Remember, you don't have to be the biggest or the strongest to do great things. It's what's inside that counts. Ever faced a challenge so big it seemed impossible? Well, David did. And guess what? He overcame it. This tale of courage begins with a young shepherd boy named David, who was chosen by God for a purpose far greater than he could ever imagine. David was not a warrior. He was not large or intimidating. He was a shepherd, a keeper of sheep. Yet when the giant named Goliath threatened his people, David stepped forward. He was not equipped with a sword, a spear, or a shield. Instead, he held in his hand a simple slingshot and 5 smooth stones. Goliath was a towering figure, a seasoned warrior who instilled fear in the bravest of men. David, on the other hand, was just a boy, but he had something that no one else had. He had faith. He had courage. He trusted in God. As David faced Goliath, he did not see an unbeatable giant. He saw a challenge that needed to be faced, a fight that needed to be fought. He saw an opportunity to show the power of faith. With unshakable confidence, David said to the towering Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." With those words, David put his trust not in weapons, but in God. As Goliath charged, David took a stone from his pouch and with a swift swing of his slingshot, sent it flying. The stone hit its mark, Goliath's forehead, and the giant fell. The battlefield fell silent. The unbeatable had been beaten. The impossible had been achieved. David, with his slingshot and his faith, had defeated the mighty Goliath. David's courage was not born from his physical strength or fighting skills. It came from his faith. His trust in God gave him the courage to face the giant, to stand against the impossible. It was this faith, this courage, that allowed a shepherd boy to become a king. This tale of courage is not just about a boy and a giant, it's a reminder of the power of faith, a testament to the strength that comes from trusting in God. When we face our giants, may we remember David. May we hold fast to our faith, may we muster our courage, and may we face our challenges head on. David's courage reminds us that with faith, we can overcome any challenge. From a shepherd boy to a king. Can you believe that? Let's find out how it happened. David, the young lad who once tended to his father's sheep, was now anointed as the king of Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel. But that was only the beginning of his journey. It took 7 long years for him to be recognized as the king over all of Israel. David was not just an ordinary king. He was a king chosen by God. He was a man after God's own heart. He didn't become king because he was the strongest or the smartest. He became king because he was humble, dedicated, and had a heart full of love for God. David's rule as king was not easy. There were battles to be fought, decisions to be made, and responsibilities to be fulfilled. But David did not let these challenges deter him. He remained committed to his duties and to his people. He ruled with justice and fairness, always seeking God's guidance in his decisions. During his rule, David not only brought peace to his nation, but he also brought prosperity. He expanded the borders of Israel, making it a powerful and respected nation in the region. He built a great palace for himself, but his heart was always set on building a temple for God. David's love for God was evident in everything he did. He wrote many beautiful psalms, songs of praise to God, which we still sing today. His relationship with God was the cornerstone of his life and his rule as king. Even when he made mistakes, he turned to God for forgiveness and guidance. David's life was a testament to his dedication to God. It showed that with God on our side, nothing is impossible. His ascension from a humble shepherd boy to the king of a prosperous nation was not a product of luck or coincidence. It was a result of his faith in God and his commitment to serving him. David's story is not just a tale of a king, it is a story of faith, perseverance, and dedication. It is a story that shows us that no matter where we come from, no matter what challenges we face, with humility, dedication, and God on our side, we can achieve great things. David's story reminds us that God sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. David may have been a shepherd boy in the eyes of men, but in the eyes of God, he was a king. David's story shows us that with humility, dedication, and God on our side, we can achieve great things. Wow, what an adventure we've had today. Let's see what we've learned. We began our journey with the touching tale of Ruth and Naomi. We saw how Ruth, a woman of great strength and loyalty, chose to stay with her mother-in-law Naomi in a time of profound loss and difficulty. Ruth's dedication teaches us how to be steadfast and loyal in our relationships. Her story is a beautiful example of how love and loyalty can lead us to unexpected blessings. Then we traveled to the time when the Israelites asked for a king. Despite having God as their leader, they insisted on having a king like other nations. This story shows us the folly of comparing ourselves to others and desiring what they have. We must trust that God's plans for us are unique and perfect. From there, we ventured into the story of David, a humble shepherd boy chosen by God to be king. This was an unexpected choice, wasn't it? David was not the strongest or the oldest among his brothers, yet God saw his heart and chose him. This teaches us that God values our hearts more than our outward appearances or abilities. It reminds us that humility and a heart dedicated to God are more precious than any worldly attribute. Next, we relive David's courageous encounter with Goliath. A young boy facing a giant might seem impossible, but David's faith in God gave him the courage to face the giant and win. This story is a powerful reminder that with faith in God, we can overcome even the biggest of challenges. Finally, we celebrated David's ascension to the throne. He went from being a shepherd boy to the king of Israel, fulfilling God's promise. This story shows us that God is faithful to his promises, and he will always guide us to where we're meant to be. Such incredible stories, aren't they? Each one filled with lessons that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. The loyalty of Ruth, the folly of the Israelites' desire for a king, God's unexpected choice of David, David's courage against Goliath, and his ascension to the throne. These stories remind us of the importance of loyalty, humility, courage, and above all, faith in God. Remember these stories and the lessons they teach us. Loyalty, humility, courage, and above all, faith in God. Until next time, keep these stories in your heart.